Do you want to be a professional photographer? How do you even start in this business? I'm going to tell you on today's episode of
Ask David Bergman.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back. Here I am, as always, answering your photography questions. If you've got photo questions, you know what to do by now. You just go to askdavidbergman.com, submit your question right there on the site. I just might pick it to answer here on a future show. Today, I've got a question sent in from Teresa, and she wants to know, how did you get started in photography? What advice would you give someone that might want to get into the business now? Thanks, Teresa, for sending in that question. I really appreciate it. Now, first you asked about my personal story, and I'm happy to talk about it, but I've got to let you know that while I hope maybe my story will inspire you to pursue your own goals, you can't copy exactly what I did. And there are really two reasons for that. First of all, I started in this business 30 years ago, and a lot of things have changed since then. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But the second reason might be even more important. There's really no set path to becoming a creative professional. If you want to be a lawyer, for example, there's a proven, clear path to becoming a lawyer. You start, of course, by going to law school. Then hopefully you get an internship at a law firm, and you keep working and working your way up the ladder until maybe you become a partner or something like that, right? It's incredibly hard work, no doubt, and not everyone is going to make it. But there are only so many paths to becoming a lawyer, and they're pretty clearly spelled out. Now, what if you want to be a writer, for example, a creative person, and you're a writer? Well, first of all, there are a lot of different kinds of writing. You could be a novelist or a journalist. You could be a technical writer. There's speech writers and screenwriters. You could even be a social media manager. There's so many different fields in writing. All of those could be fulfilling careers for someone who loves to write. But how do people actually get those jobs? Of course, there are as many different paths as there are people, and their stories are all different. You can't plan your life based on J.K. Rowling's story, for example, hoping to write the next Harry Potter. Her entire life story helped put her in a position to go ahead and create those books. What I'm really trying to say is that to get work in a creative field like photography, you need to be creative, right? You need to forge your own path. My friend Brett Carlson has a great quote about being a professional photographer. He says, quote, "The job is getting the job." I love that because it's 100% true. The short version of my story is that I was a musician first. I played drums and I had a camera, but it was barely even a hobby as I made my way through the band program at my high school. I then attended the Berklee College of Music to study music production. I was sure I was going to be a producer, and then for various reasons transferred back to my hometown and went to the University of Miami. Go Canes! I was still studying music at the time, but I stumbled into the school newspaper office, and then they sent me out to shoot some pictures. I was absolutely hooked, and then the next semester I sold my drums for lenses and switched to a photojournalism major, and the rest is kind of history. Because Miami is really such a high-profile sports school, I was shooting all of the games at the time and was eventually approached by someone at United Press International. That was one of the big wire services at the time. They wanted me to shoot some games for them as a stringer, as a freelancer. I did that for about a year or so, and then I walked into the Associated Press office with a box of prints and met with the bureau chief over there. I wound up freelancing for them for about a year or two and eventually got a full-time job at the Miami Herald. I was 23 years old and I was on staff at one of the biggest newspapers in the country. But like I said before, you can't follow that path. You can't follow that path exactly. A whole bunch of things had to happen just a certain way to put me in position for those opportunities. Now, Teresa, you also asked me for advice for someone who wants to get into the business today. Now, about that, I'd say there's good news and there's bad news. I'm going to give you the bad news first. The bad news is that many of the old business models are now gone. Some photographers who started out with me in newspapers back in the day have stayed and worked at newspapers for their whole career. They worked at a small paper, a medium paper, and then maybe a large paper. Some of them moved on to shoot work for magazines and other editorial publications. Others might have gone the commercial route and are now shooting giant ad campaigns. I've kind of done all of the above. But if you're just starting out today, you're probably not going to get a job at a newspaper like I did in those days. Very few of those jobs still exist because of the state of the media industry today. However, that's the bad news. The good news is it's kind of a whole new world for visual information today. Pictures and videos are everywhere. There are screens in elevators with images on them. Digital billboards are constantly showing updated content. These things didn't exist when I first started out. It's the wild, wild west in a way, and people are being paid to produce all of that work. Now, yes, I know there are plenty of bad clients who want work for free or less than what it's worth, but you have to be creative to find the good clients and get your work in front of them. Remember, the job is getting the job. Create your own business model if you have to. My Shoot from the Pit concert photography workshop didn't exist before I invented it. I took my unique position of being a good photo teacher, I guess, along with my work as a tour photographer, and then mix that up with the perfect client to create an awesome experience. Shameless plug, you can go to shootfromthepit.com for more information about that awesome experience. But in addition to my workshops and my work as a tour photographer, I do other things. I sell prints, I license my archive, I've produced coffee table books, and of course I do this show, Ask David Bergman for Adorama. This is all part of my career as a creative professional. Now, there are two pieces of advice that I could give just based on everything that I've learned so far throughout my career. The first is that you need to understand business. Learning how to properly run a service business is going to make the difference between having a successful career and always struggling for money. You have to understand things like taxes and marketing and promotion and hiring, reading a profit and loss, knowing your cost of doing business. All of those things are super important. You're always going to be working on the creative side. I'm still learning and growing as a photographer, but a solid business foundation can't be overlooked. It's super, super important. And the other thing that has really gotten me through all these years is persistence. At each phase of my career, there's been rejection and there's been disappointment, but I've hung in there, right? I try to keep producing work that I'm proud of. I talk and network with as many people as I can, and I just keep moving forward. 30 years later, I'd say it worked out pretty nicely. So thanks, Teresa, for sending in that question. Remember, if you've got your own photo question, it can be technical, creative, or business, anything to do with photography, just go to askdavidbergman.com and fill out that form. I'm going to do my best to answer as many of them as I can right here on the show. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to see you back here next time with a brand new question right here on Ask David Bergman.